And this is the kind of stuff that's keeping them, because they can take their degree, they can take their entrepreneurial spirit, they can take their buying power, they can take their entire demographic and go somewhere else anytime, because they don't expect to work anywhere from 40 years and retire. It ain't even in the cards. So if you don't have this, you're in trouble. And again, we're pushing people to be thinking on that kind of stuff. That's third places, that's all kinds of different aspects of what that might actually mean. Density works. Here's Ann Arbor, I believe, so people can clap in the room. I don't talk about East Lansing anymore, it's not listening anymore. Density works. And you know, quite frankly, in Michigan, we hate two things. We hate density and we hate sprawl. We got to figure out which one we hate worse. Okay? I mean, it's just, we got to get there. We got to get there. And we're now trying to support an infrastructure that's probably too big, and we're not being very good about how we're doing this kind of stuff. And quite frankly, this needs to be more dense as well in Ann Arbor. And I think, you know, Ann Arbor in many ways is a beacon from an economic standpoint here in Michigan, but compared against the Madisons and the Austins and some of the other sort of similar type towns, they do much better. They do much better at retaining young people and economics and entrepreneurship, and a lot of it gets back to sort of this density issue and what they're offering in third places and all that stuff. Walkable urbanism. This matters immensely. People want this. People are choosing this. Young people especially, think that $400 a month plus gas and insurance and parking in a downtown atmosphere is a complete and utter waste of money. They don't get it. They don't want anything to do with it. So when you come to Detroit, for example, and you get off the plane at the airport, and there's no train to pick you up, and there's no rapid bus system or anything else, we're at an economic disadvantage. That person doesn't want to be here. They don't know what the tax rate is. They don't know what they're going to be paying in income taxes or what the regulatory environment might be to start their new business. They're not staying. They're not staying. In other regions like this one, we need to do a better job with walkable urbanism, connecting people in different ways. So again, transportation is the very important thing there. Not just our traditional transportation network, which is crumbling around us. We all drove in today. It probably, if it was like mine, if your commute was like mine, you dodged a few big boulders in the road and everything else. So we've got to do a better job with that. But high-speed rail, transit, those types of things are just a demand. We figure that one out, or we don't have a shot, especially in the large metropolitan area like Southeast Michigan. But even here in East Lansing and Lansing, Grand Rapids, you're obviously not going to have trains running through everywhere. But again, this is how people want to travel moving forward. And again, the retiring baby boomers want to travel this way too, or move around this way too quite a bit. We find that moving people around within metropolitan areas this way, again, is something that is linked to positive economic activity in other regions around the state. Diversity matters. Again, Michigan is something we've not done always that well. I'll go back to Southeast Michigan. Detroit is the second highest population of African American population in the country, and 3 of its suburbs are in the top 10 of Caucasian populations. That's not what people want to see. Used to be people demanded to walk down the street and see people who look just like them. Now people want to walk down the street and see people who don't look like that. And back to London. It's not just a black-white issue. It's an issue of being open to immigration. That's where a lot of this especially in inner cities, we're seeing huge immigration and entrepreneurship happening in that particular area in places like New York and Chicago and other places, and quite frankly outside the USA much better, Toronto, Vancouver, those types of places. But we've got to sort of figure this one out as well, because this is something, again, a younger generation it's largely colorblind, does not see as a positive for us here in Michigan. Green and sustainable, I've talked about this quite a bit. May sound fluffy. Put it on the list of must-haves moving forward in terms of what people are looking for. Access to technology. This is how people work in a lot of respects. Can somebody work like this in your community? You know, can you be running 4 or 5 different things at once? Do you have high speed? He's working at 2 o'clock in the morning in a coffee shop because he was doing something else all day. So do your coffee shops close down at 9? Is there wireless activity there? He wants to be around other people like him, because the networking is one of the more important things to do from an entrepreneurial perspective. So there better be 10 or 20 or 30 more tables of this guy. He needs to have 1,000 nights in place, everything else. So it's not just somebody sitting on a computer doing crazy stuff. It's a sort of a way of life that we're looking at doing here, and one that we're not keeping up on. I think we're starting to do better on that. I think you're seeing huge leadership from the local level on this in terms of what communities are doing to inspire these sort of new ways of doing things. We need the state in some ways to hold up its portion of the battle. leveraging anchor institutions. Probably never before have places like universities and hospitals and museums and other places been as important, not just as cultural institutions and as places of learning, but also from an economic standpoint. It's hugely important. I mean, I read the other day that 75% of all patents in the United States come from federally funded operations. Most of those through federal grants through public universities. So huge churning opportunities happening around universities. Healthcare especially, the 2 million jobs created during the entire Bush administration. There were 2 million jobs created in healthcare. So that's the real growth part, even though they're kind of upside down right now too. But moving forward, that's the real growth area. So how are we leveraging these areas? And in many cases, how are we working with them to create a lot of the things that we know are going to be important moving forward? Entrepreneurship matters. Again, I go back to long tail theory. This is where the growth is. This is what's happening when a company of 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 becomes 10 or 20 and maybe 100 or 200, or maybe it goes away and somebody starts something else and they do something different. But this is where people want to be. It's where the growth is, and we need to do a better job of incubating it here. Daniel Pink, we paid him a whole bunch of money to come in last year to talk to us, so I think I put this in here to try to get it back. But it's important. It's just talking about thinking differently. I mean, again, I think if you asked me and you didn't, but pretend you asked me, Dan, what's the biggest problem we have here in Michigan? It's culture. It's culture. It's still having a 20th century culture. It's still trying to work everything into a 20th century metric and recreate the heyday, which might have been 1970 in the state, or 1950 in Detroit, or 1980 in Grand Rapids, or whatever it might have been. We continue to kind of want to go down that vein, so to speak, and the big three sort of working culture we have, especially in Southeast Michigan, is non-entrepreneurial. It's kind of the I think a real irony that Henry Ford, who was perhaps the greatest entrepreneur that Michigan certainly, or the country has seen, or perhaps the world has seen, created an entire middle class that 100 years later is sort of a non-entrepreneurial climate that we've created, where people don't go to work unless they get their health care, and they get this and they get that, and we keep trying to recreate that, and it's not what is happening, and it's not where we're going in other places around the country and around the world. So thinking differently is important. What we can do, changing the culture and the DNA is important. Be open to new ways of doing things. Especially talking about marketing ourselves from a local issue standpoint, a local community standpoint. Web 2.0 is amazing. You can do anything in Web 2.0. I was up in Marquette. We have anybody from the UP here? No? Okay. One of my questions, somebody's going to raise their hand. I'm 0 for 3 so far. I was up in the UP, and they had a group called the Marquette County Ambassadors. And if you have been to Marquette lately, some great things have happened up there. They have Northern Michigan University. They have the only full-service hospital in the UP. They got a great historic downtown. They've got Lake Michigan shorefront. They're named one of the top 10 places in the world to do kayaking and to do off-road biking. So there's some really cool things that matter. And the guy that picked me up to come in and talk was the airport chairman of the airport authority, and he was bragging that they'd just gotten a new direct flight to Chicago. It was the first time they've ever had one. And I said, there's 285,000 college-educated millennials living in the city of Chicago. Go talk to them. You don't need to send letters and make phone calls and everything. Go talk to them. Find them on Facebook. Find them on MySpace. Find them on all the different sites and Twittering and Yelp and everywhere else that you can identify these people, and tell them what you've got up here. If 1% of them come for a vacation, that's 3,000 people. 1% of them stay behind. That's enough money to turn an economy in an area that's got, I think, 15,000 people living in Marquette. So there's some real opportunities that no one knows about Marquette right now, and they might have a feeling or image of Marquette that's completely outdated, but now Marquette can sort of go out and redefine who it is, and so can East Lansing, and so can Detroit, and so can Michigan in general, quite frankly. But we've got to be smart about how we do it. We need to recognize the quality of life trumps taxes. That's what we keep telling those people over there in that building with the big dome on it. Again, we've been in all kinds of discussions, and we've got a lousy tax code right now, and we're probably going to be rewriting it in the next couple of years. But quite honestly, we can't be rewriting it to save 20th century jobs that are already gone and aren't coming back. We've got to create these places. This is the type of stuff that we need to be looking at. So we need to have an environment where we create these types of places that are going to be competitive. And that's, people are starting to understand that, I think, but it's something that's very important as we look forward. Uniqueness is important. Creative regionalism is important. We hear a lot about regionalism. Tom had talked about why do we have so many communities